Hey, Graham. Just about to kick off now, so. Right, okay. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to the September virtual meetup for the Welsh Azure user group. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Okay, just a quick round of introductions. Hello from Welsh Azure user group. This is a local community user group, so anybody watching this video on the record or anybody in the session tonight, help us spread the word. Help us spread the word of these great sessions that we have speakers on, giving up their own time to come on and teach us some Azure goodness. So please do help us spread the word. This session will be available, as we just said, on recording afterwards. So if you're watching this on recording, help us share that around and get the good word out of everybody that's been speaking tonight. There's our Welsh Azure user group team behind the scenes. Like I say, it's a local user group, so we're always open to ideas, talks. We've got a sessionized page. If you want to speak at the group, please reach out to one of us. We can get you that link over, or troll through our Twitter page and you'll find the link there somewhere. Yeah, submit your talk. More than happy to have anybody, whether you're a novice speaker, whether you're a pro speaker, it doesn't matter. It's a bit of a platform for everybody to kind of get that kind of skill under their belt as well, I suppose, because it's always good to be able to speak, which I'm not capable of doing at the minute for some reason. I can't find my words, but always a good skill to have. So yeah, if you're looking to cut your teeth in speaking, reach out. We can get you on, do some public speaking. It's always good fun. Okay, so tonight we've got, as usual, we always seem to attract the best kind of speakers. They're awesome. Everybody that's come on is awesome. I mean, there's no other word. But we've got Viktor Hedberg coming on. He's going to talk to us about tiering and that security and governance tiering in Azure and how should we be doing it. He'll be joining us for the second session. We've had to do a little bit of a switch around if you've seen the meetup schedule. So we've done a little bit of a switch around tonight. So Viktor will be joining us. I know we had a little bit of a clash with meetings. He'll be joining us in a little while for the second session. But we'll be kicking off very soon with Joe Amuna, who are going to be talking to us all around Azure Data Factory triggers. So trigger warning, Azure Data Factory ahead. I love the titles. I love the titles that are kind of fun. It's always good, isn't it? So yeah, in terms of timing, I'll shut up in a minute. So Joe and Moona will probably start off a little bit earlier than that. But as always, we've got our quiz. That'll be after Viktor's session, probably around about 10 past, 8, something like that. So stick around for that. And it's with the amazing Quizzer platform that Mr. Fatunka there is so cleverly designed and deployed, and undoubtedly will be getting subscriptions out there in the public forum and going against the big boys at some point. But yeah, if you've not seen that, stick around for that, because it's all open source, isn't it, Matt? People can get their hands on it. Yep. And if you used to Kahoot, what's the other one? There was Kahoot. There was another one, wasn't there, Matt, that we used? Mentimeter. Yeah, that was the one. If you use them, you know that they're not exactly cheap if you want to buy a subscription. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that. We'll put the links out later on anyway. But yeah, stick around for the quiz. As always, some Amazon vouchers up for grabs, and it's always a good fun session, especially when you've got Mr. Fatunka writing the questions. Anyway, it keeps me on my toes. Okay, housekeeping rules. It's the usual stuff. Everybody be courteous to each other. You've all got control of your own mics and obviously the ability to come on and off mute. So please do stay on mute unless you're invited to speak by one of the speakers. There are no silly questions. We're all here to learn. So if you've got any questions or you've got a comment or anything like that, be interactive. The chat is open. Drop them in there. Undoubtedly, the speakers will probably be keeping an eye on the chat. If not, we can raise them at the end of the session. And we also have got a QR code for some feedback. So at the end of the session, we'll flash that QR code. Please do give us some feedback, because like I say, we want to try and set up these sessions to kind of suit the audience that so diligently come and see us once a month. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Like I say, be interactive, enjoy the sessions, and yeah, don't be scared of asking any questions, because we're all here to learn. Quick shout out to our sponsors of the events. We've, as always, we've had the fantastic support of 3 sponsors for the last couple of years now. Servant, big shout out to those guys, absolutely fantastic. They support a couple of the local community groups based up in Glasgow. Des and the team up there are phenomenal, great guys, really helpful towards the community with setting up support for user groups. You can see they do the Northern Azure group, the Glasgow Azure group, and of course us down here in Wales. With that, thank you to Admiral as well, being a staunch supporter for the Welsh Azure user group for the last couple of years, headquartered down in South Wales. So huge shout out to those guys, and of course NetApp as well. Equally, we've been lucky to kind of draw in a few kind of headline companies there to kind of give us that support over the last few years. So That's it. Anything from you, Matt, before we jump straight in? Anything you want to add?
No, we might have a special edition for the first place winner on the quiz tonight as well.
Oh, okay. So you got to stick around to.
He's in that one, yeah.
I like it. I like it. I like it. Right. Right. Okay. Cool. Well, in that case, we'll kick off a little bit earlier, and we'll hand you straight over to Joe and Muna. So, trigger warning.
Great stuff. Thanks, John. And yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here, actually. I mean, I've not got much of a history with the user group. This is the first time that myself and Muna as well, I think, have been here, if memory serves. But I've watched a few on catch up, actually, and it's nice to see them when they do pop up on Twitter and things. So yeah, it's a great pleasure to. It feels like finally be here, I suppose, and contribute back, because yeah, there's been a few that I've sort of attended in my own time, and derived a lot of value from it. So big thanks as well, John, for sort of putting the energy into it and organising these things. I mean, I know it doesn't go on its own. You know, it's got to come from somewhere, and so everything that you do in the community really is phenomenal. And yeah, pleasure to finally really be on with the real Johnny Tips. So yeah, here we are. Yeah, so like quick intro. I'm Joe. I'm a cloud solution architect. I work at Microsoft. Been there for like 3.5 years, and I work in the data and AI space, which is obviously quite a big space. The sort of main focus really for me is in the enterprise analytics world, and so it's in that what I call like traditional analytics of getting all your data, getting it in the right shape, and building visualizations on top of it. Sprinkling bits of DevOps and infrastructure as code and things like that through it as well. I'm going to be co-presenting this session today with my colleague Muna. So Muna, do you want to come up and do a little intro as well?
Yeah, first of all, I echo everything Joe has said. Thank you for having us today. I'm also a cloud solution architect here at Microsoft, also aligned to data and AI. My background is a bit more data science-y, so more leaning towards the AI side of things. But again, trigger warning, as your data factory is ahead, this is fun. Analytics is always a bit fun. So yeah, that's a bit of me, and I'll pass back to Joe.
Nice one, thanks. Yeah, and I guess like as you can see from the size, from the title, we wanted to keep this sort of pretty easygoing and lightweight. So yeah, I love the sort of sentiment that you were driving there as well, John, around the charter and no silly questions. You know, I'm a big fan of that, and so yeah, very keen, both in the session and at any point. You know, if people are watching this, if you just reach out and catch up. Yeah, always fun things happening and things that we can talk about. Anyway, so let's get into the meat of it. In terms of what we'll look at today, we've got a bit of a level set session to begin with, just on Data Factory, if there are folks that haven't seen it before, with a bit of a demo, and then really we'll start to actually focus in on these things called triggers. And there are different types of triggers. They've got a specific purpose within Data Factory. And then we've got some demos specifically around the event-driven triggers, which should hopefully give you a bit of a flavor on how you can actually use these to do great stuff in your applications and analytics platforms. So yeah, let's start first with this introduction then. What actually is Data Factory? And I think when I think of Data Factory, there's really like a core piece in my head that it really meets the demand of, and it's all around orchestration and transformation of data in the cloud. It's really good at moving large volumes of data. It obviously works with small volumes as well, but from a scalability perspective, it's all serverless. It can handle you know, gigabyte, terabyte size data sets, and it really does just chew through data as you can sort of throw it at it. Nice things as well around sort of capabilities to hook into both systems that are on premises as well as in the cloud. And there are different pieces of functionality in there. If you're interested in understanding a bit more about that, look for the integration runtime. Find the documentation on that, and there's sort of different integration runtimes you can use to deploy both close to your on-prem sources as well as using the Azure hosted ones. This author and monitor feature, this is all predominantly UI driven, really. There are some options for dropping in some code there as well, but really this is all about building out the work that you want Data Factory to do for you, and it's all really visual tools. In fact, Minna will show us some of that in just a moment. And the other thing as well to call out here is the SSIS package execution. This is the third class of runtime that you can deploy, and really good for people that have got an existing investment in data transformation with SQL Server integration services. There's a really nice path actually to pick up those pieces of work that you've already got that are running on-prem and actually run those in the SSIS runtime in the cloud. So one of the things as well that's quite exciting is that we can pull data from lots of different places. I won't tell you all of them. You're capable to go and look at this for yourselves, but I think just the number can be quite a good thing to focus on. It's a constant investment area as well, so they keep adding some on there. Particularly in the SaaS space, I think the sort of newer connectors tend to come online with. And I guess the only other headline to sort of call out here is, and quite clearly from the logos that we're looking at here, these aren't just Microsoft or Azure services that we're connecting into. There's competing cloud platform connectors, there's open source connectors, there's SaaS products as well. So really full range of services that you can connect to with these connectors out of the box. And of course, there's some sort of more open connectors, things like RESTful connectors or ODBC that you can use to just connect into just about anything, really. Then, yeah, in terms of like the actual pieces of functionality that are within the service, and we'll take a little look at this in the demo in just a moment. But there are really these four areas that I'd like to sort of leave in your head as the main things that you can use for Data Factory. So the orchestration that you've got there, obviously building pipelines in a graphical fashion, chaining together different pieces of logic, processing, movement of data, transformation of data. Yeah, you can push these processes down into different compute engines as well. So super flexible and allows you to manage processes across many different systems within your architecture. We've then got these two different approaches for what I call sort of low-no code data transformation and exploration. So we've got the mapping data flows in the middle there and Power Query on the right. Essentially, these are both ways that you can use, again, both very scalable, so can work with large amounts of data. And I really think about mapping data flows more for like known data and operating on schemas, and then Power Query is quite good for exploratory analysis and more unknown data sets, I suppose. And the final piece as well, and we'll see this through the demos, is the monitoring pieces, so you can get a view into what's actually going on within your Data Factory and understand where things are going well and perhaps where things aren't. So at this point, I'll hand over to Minna just to give us a bit of an overview of what the interface actually looks like, and critically how to get there as well.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I'm just going to share my screen. Let me know if it's visible. Visible?
Yep, visible.
Okay, all good? Okay, let's get started. So, hi everyone. So I'll run you through a quick overview of the Azure Data Factory and its main functionalities. And as Joe mentioned, I always like to start off on the portal. So just to kind of show you how to get there. So I've already searched it, so I'll show you. If you type Data Factories onto the search bar, it lands you into this blank like canvas. And for the purpose of this demo, I've already kind of done my homework, I like to call it, but I've already created a demo environment. However, if you do want to create a Data Factory, it's pretty simple. All you need to do is press create on the top left hand corner and follow the steps. For instance, picking your subscription, you're creating a resource group for it, and the region you want to deploy in. But for the purpose of this demo, I've already done it. I called it ADF demo, and from here it launches you into the Azure Data Factory Studio. It's a separate link, but this is where all the magic happens. So, okay, nice, it opened up. So today we'll focus on the main functionalities, as I mentioned earlier. And so if we press on the pen, which is, it's not called a pen, but it's called the author pane. So on the left-hand side, we call this the author pane. And over here, we can create pipelines, and pipelines are useful because they create a graphical author experience to build complex scalable processes that integrate many different things. So for instance, let me show you. We've got our copy data here. For instance, we can grab a Synapse notebook and copy data and connect them to each other. We could also grab a, I don't know, Azure Function and again connect that to our data sets. We can connect pretty much anything essentially, and so it creates this beautiful graphical visual thing, which is quite useful, especially if you don't want to code it, and it makes things nice and simple. Another thing I kind of want to draw your attention towards is if we press the plus here and pipeline and click on template gallery, there's loads of already made templates. So they range from like super simple to kind of more difficult. So for example, let me show you a difficult one. That's all I'm seeing. Data flow search by Log Analytics. It's already created. You can kind of get started on that, add, takeaway, but there's also more simple ones like extract data from PDF and etc. So if you don't know how to get started, there is that option on ADF on how to build the template. Let me cancel that. Let's go back. Earlier, Joe mentioned and touched on the low code, no code transformation experience available in Azure Data Factory. So the first one is data flows, and this is right here. And if we click on new data flow, this is what it looks like. And data flows, they're great to enable people to build scalable data transformation pipelines. So if we select source, as you can see, we can add a source or you can add a floorlet. And a lot of the times, one of the questions we get is, what's a floorlet? And essentially, it's a reusable container of data flow activities, and it enables like users to reuse existing logic. And essentially, they make it easier for people to apply the same processing rules to data. And for instance, you might have like a process, like you want to process some dates or customer IDs in the same way across all your data flows. That's how you do it. But we're not going to do we're not going to add a floorlet today. I just kind of wanted to explain it because you will see that word pop up a few times. But we're going to add a source, and in source, we're going to press the little plus button here. And as you can see, there's a long list of different things that you can do. And this empowers those that are not comfortable with coding to build out pipelines, and it supports all common transformations. You can join, conditional split, the list goes on. So that's all the great stuff you could do in data flows. Another solution, which is a low code, no code transformation, is Power Queries. And as Joe explained earlier, it's for those of you who've like used Power Queries in the past, you can lift a Power Query process into ADF. So again, this is also pretty simple to kind of get started on, and it helps with that user experience. Next thing I want to touch on.
Is it just me, or is the screen share sort of frozen, or I'm just looking at the data factory at the moment, Mana?
Oh, is it?
Yeah, Matt, is that the same for you? Yeah, James says it's frozen as well, maybe.
So it's been frozen for a while.
I think just from when you were doing the flowless bits, but that's okay. So
has it caught up now?
No, we're just looking
okay.
at
Should I reshare?
Yeah, maybe.
Reshare. Oops, not content from camera, sorry. How about now? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see the full screen now. That's great.
Okay, even better. Is it up to date?
Yep. Yeah, I can see your
Okay,
mouse moving around.
good. Kind of can't. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know where I left off, but I think I showed you the flowlets, and it cut off where. Did you see me add a source to the data flows?
No, I think that's just where it stopped. Yeah.
Okay. So then
Well,
I
that's what
guess
you were
we'll go
talking
back.
about. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially, I won't bore you, but essentially in the data flows, you can add a new data flow and you can add a source or a flowlet. And if we select add source and the little button here, there's a long list of different things that you can do. And again, this is there to empower those that are not comfortable with coding, and it's just like an easy way to kind of get started with different things. And again, similarly with Power Query, as Joe explained earlier, it's a low-code, no-code experience, data transformation experience, and it's very simple to get started on. Okay, so the next thing, once we move on from the pen, the author pane, we move on to the monitor. So what is monitor? If you use Azure Monitor, it's very similar to that. So over here, you can kind of get the operational view of what's happening in your Azure Data Factory. So it's a great place to see if anything's failed, if something's not working, to see how long things take. So let me give you a quick overview. So if we select dashboards, you get this. Mine is all green, great. So you get this graphical view of everything, all the activities that are happening, any triggers, is all there. You can also change it from 24 hours to 30 days, any sort of problems you might have run into. On the side over here, kind of want to call out, you can also check your pipeline runs. And you can see the duration, the status, if anything's failed, this is where you pick it up. I'm going to come back to trigger runs later on once we speak about it, but similar to that, you can also check if any triggers you've triggered fail or are successful. Last thing I want to call out is the alerts and metrics. Over here, we are able to see if there's any sort of notifications, any sort of updates. If something's not working, you'll be able to pick it up there. And yeah, so it's a great tool. Next up is manage. This is super important because this is the place where you set up if you want to connect to any data sources. So as Joe mentioned earlier, we support over 100 different data sources, and they can be both within Azure and outside of Azure, and they're called link services. So if we select new, I can show you here. So we've got Amazon S3, we've got Azure Blob Storages, which is what I'm using. We've got, the list goes on and on and on. GitHub, Google Cloud, storage, it goes on and on. So this is where you would be able to connect to anything. Also, you can check your integration runtimes. And another cool feature is the fact that we can, if you've got a Purview account, you can connect your Azure Data Factory to your Microsoft Purview account. For those of you that might not know what Purview is a cloud-based data governance tool. So it kind of provides that single pane of glass where you can kind of see what everything, get that overview, governance of your data, and it connects with Azure Data Factory seamlessly. And yeah, that is the end of my demo. I hope I didn't go too fast, but I'm going to pass over to Joe. That's going to run you through the different types of triggers.
Awesome. Thanks, Mana.
Alright.
So let's take a look at the triggers now. I guess the first thing to think about then is what is a trigger? And I think that the easiest way to think about it is it's really the conditions that you can set that need to be met in order for your pipeline to be executed. And when you start this pipeline, you have the opportunity to pass in some parameters as well. It's actually quite a good exercise to go through when you're building out your pipelines. Metadata is your friend, I suppose I should say here, and you can actually create pipelines and abstract a lot of the details, not just from the pipelines, from the data sets, as well, so that you can actually start to use the same pipelines and data sets across multiple different files or source systems, and can really get to some quite advanced states where the metadata is actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and you can end up with sort of one place to essentially change the jobs that you want to run, and then through the parameters that you have within the pipeline, you can sort of let the metadata do the talking, if you like, and so triggers can actually have that metadata associated with them, yeah, so those are really kind of the two pieces of the triggers: the parameter handling, and the conditions, or the conditions is the best word here, to be met for your pipeline to be executed. I think really there are two types of triggers, or two buckets really, that we can keep our triggers in. The first of those are timed triggers, time-based triggers, and the others are the event triggers. So from a time perspective, we got the schedule and tumbling window triggers. They both run on this wall clock schedule. You can think of that as essentially saying things like run this every hour or every 15 minutes, or run this every other Monday, things like that. But there's some additional functionality that you get with the tumbling window trigger, and some subtle differences, I suppose, that we'll take a look at in a moment with the tumbling windows. With the event triggers then, two other different types of triggers that we get here, and these are basically triggers that we're running based on an event. Now, these events can come from two places. The first of these is from the storage event trigger, and this is basically from events that are occurring as a result of activity within your storage account in Azure. The other is a custom event trigger. The clue's in the name here. You can source your events essentially from anywhere. The example that we'll look at is actually looking at sourcing events from a Sql database and passing these through using Azure Functions. But really, this is a incredibly flexible approach that you can take to essentially build out any sort of event-based processing of your data using Data Factory and these custom event triggers. So for the schedule triggers then, these are pretty straightforward. I think these are really the easiest to understand. It does what it says on the tin. I want to run this pipeline every day or what have you, set it up, fire and forget. You can additionally add an end time to your trigger if you want. So if you only wanted to run this for a certain period of time, that's an option. And the other thing to call out as a difference between the schedule triggers here and the tumbling window triggers is that these triggers can have a many-to-many relationship with your pipelines. So again, this is quite good for that sort of low friction, low complexity approach where you just want to have triggers associated with pipelines and to have a pipeline or pipelines triggered at a given time. When we think then about the tumbling window triggers, these are functionally very similar. We can set up a time window that or a time that we want these triggers to start from, but we also have some additional features and we retain state here as well. I think this image at the top describes these tumbling windows in a very digestible way. I pulled this from the website, the sources there. But these are discrete units of time, fixed time intervals, and we can use these fixed time intervals to do things like incrementally extract, transform, and load data that might be coming from a source system, or we might be pulling this from our data lake. And we can also use this to chunk up processes to backfill data warehouses and things like that. With the tumbling windows, you also get some additional features. I think I've probably said that 3 times now. These features are listed here, but things like retry policies and rerunning these jobs if they fail. Also setting up pipeline dependencies as well. So start this pipeline on completion, trigger these 3 things like that. You can stack that up with the tumbling window triggers, and is often one of the reasons why people go for them. This is a diagram here as well that explains the differences between the 2. Those window start and end times that I mentioned earlier, the system variables, these are referenced here, and so those you can use as parameters within your pipeline, as I was describing earlier. But the link for these for this table is in the slides here as well, which I'll post afterwards. And yeah, I think basically the headline here is, if you're looking for something that's easy to use and fire and forget type of scenarios that aren't going to handle failure conditions, then go for the schedule event triggers. If you're looking for something more complex, if you're looking to process your data in increments, so for example, incremental extract or incremental loads, and if you're trying to do things like backfill large amounts of data, or what was the other thing? Or to yeah, build out these pipelines that are using these time windows, then the tumbling window trigger is really the way to go. So we're going to have a look now at the event triggers. Mona, do you want to talk us through the storage events?
Yeah, so the storage event triggers are event driven, but essentially with any sort of data integration scenario, we often need like our customers to trigger pipelines based on events happening in the storage account, and it can be on the arrival or the deletion of a Azure blob storage. And similarly to Synapse pipelines, Data Factory, they integrate with Azure Event Grid, and this lets you trigger pipelines on these events. So we use storage event triggers to execute pipelines based on events that are happening in our storage accounts. So essentially, under the hood, Data Factory is relying on a native integration with Azure Event Grid, which allows us to trigger pipelines when blobs are created or deleted. So this is all happening without writing a line of code. So in my example today, I'll show you how to set up a storage event trigger with a simple working example of like when we upload a new file to the storage account. The storage event trigger is used in all these files in the inbound container and are copied into another container. Let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at this in action. I just kind of spoke about the overview just now, but I'll share my screen and we'll get into the action of what it looks like. Does it work? Yeah. Okay, so I kind of give you an overview of what it looks like in theory, but let's get into the demo. So we start off again on our author pane, and essentially in a nutshell, you can run pipelines when files are sent to us immediately, and this literally happens instantaneously. So let me just delete these connections from earlier. So if we select copy data, as you can see, we've got our source and sync, but actually let me come back to that. I'm going to show you our data sets. So you can kind of get an understanding of the containers and how everything kind of comes together. As I mentioned earlier, I've already done my homework, so a lot of these things have already been done in the background. But if we select data sets and we select inbound, I want to draw your attention to link services. As you can see, is pointing to my storage account, and this is my inbound container, and there's a CSV in there. Also with the landing, same, it's pointing towards the same storage account. Again, CSV format. Now, if we go back to our pipeline in the copy data, the source data set is inbound over here, and in the sync, it's pointing at landing. So with all of that, we can now trigger our storage event trigger. So I've created one, but if you want to create one, all you would need to do is just press choose trigger, select new, and it will kind of land you into a page that looks like this. So you would have to name it. If you want, you can give it a description. You select the Azure subscription that you require, the storage account name, and you select your container, the one that you're going to upload it to. That's the one you select. Also, as I showed you earlier, it is .csv, and we selected blob created. The reason for this is it's one of the conditions of a trigger, but yeah, so we create our conditions on there. We select continue, and over here it gives us like a quick preview of what's inside our container. So inside our container, all we've got at the moment is a drink CSV and people CSV. We then go on, continue. I don't need to finish this off just because this trigger is already created, but that's just to give you a quick gist of what's happening in the background. Now, this is where the fun bit and the exciting bit starts. So we will now upload a file, and we would do it. We'll go back to our portal. Let me actually go back to the portal. We find the storage account that you've appointed everything at. So for me, is Lamuna demo storage account. We select storage browser, blob containers. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got the inbound and the landing. If we select inbound, again, drinks and people, same with landing, drinks and people. As you can see, they're identical. There's nothing different between the two. Now, if we upload a CSV file in the inbound, I'll show you how quickly it uploads. Selected, yeah, how quickly it uploads and goes into our landing successfully. Okay, we press landing, it's not there. We just press refresh. There it is. Took longer than usual. So what I just showed you is how, as you can see, it successfully happened. But essentially, we just moved a file from A to B, but in a macro scale, you could move massive data warehouses. You can move a lot bigger things than just a CSV file, and then we'll go stacks again for real, from one place to another. So I'm gonna now go back to the Azure monitor that I kind of mentioned earlier, and in the trigger runs over here, it shows us that it was successful, and I do kind of want to see how long it took, because it did take a bit longer. Trigger time, yeah, it did take slightly longer, but yeah, so essentially, if let's just say your trigger doesn't work, you can just always go back to the Azure monitor to check if something's gone wrong. Another thing I want to call out here is also, now that Joe has kind of gone through all the different types of triggers, you can run loads of different triggers, but you can also kind of select the ones that you want to check. Let's just say you run a tumbling one and a storage one at the same time, and one didn't work. You can select whichever ones you want at the top. In my case, I've only run a few storage events once today, so there's not much going on.
Could you make the text a bit bigger on the screen for us?
Can you see it? No.
Yeah, it's just like quite zoomed out is all.
Okay.
Have you got the zoom or
yeah,
control? Yeah.
Let me do
nice.
that.
Thank you.
Can you see it better now?
Nice.
Okay, I think it's too big. Is this okay? There's definitely a ghost. But yes, so all I wanted to show you from everything I showed you is the fact that by running this storage event trigger, I didn't need to put in a line of code. It was very simple, it was very quick. It did take a bit longer, but it's getting dark outside, and yeah, and you can monitor any sort of problems on Azure Data Factory monitor. So with all of that said, I'm now going to pass over to Joe. That's going to run you through a demo on custom event triggers.
Thanks, Mona. Yeah, thanks for doing the Zoom as well.
No worries.
I'll try and keep mine visible as well while I'm doing it. So this is sort of the final piece of the session today. We're going to look at these custom event triggers, and this actually will build on what Mona's already shown with the storage event triggers. Really, the triggers that we've seen Mona just walk us through there is really a graphical way to set up the triggers based on those storage events. The custom event triggers really are using the same underlying technology. It's using event grid under the hood, and we're using these custom topics, basically any topic that we create within event grid. So this demo actually was born out of a customer use case, and the customer I was working with, they had a metadata framework that they were looking to migrate into the cloud along with their data warehouse. And this custom metadata framework, as they ported it into the cloud, they were looking for a way to continue to use it as it was, but modernize it in a way that meant that they could actually use some of the functionality within Data Factory to do things like load their incremental extracts from their source systems into Azure Synapse. Unfortunately, we didn't actually end up using this pattern through the course of the project, but as always with these sorts of things, it weighed on my mind. So in the last few months or so, I actually found the time to work with these new Azure SQL bindings that we've got for Azure Functions to actually build out a worked example for the use case that we were working on in that particular project earlier this year. And yeah, what we'll see, I'll work this through in a similar way to how Mona has. So I'll show you how this is all set up, and we'll do that working from right to left. And then we'll actually have a go at triggering our custom event trigger, and hopefully we'll see our process flow the whole way through. I guess the only difference to call out between what you're looking at on the side here and what we're actually looking at is the functions that will be running locally. These are not going to be running on a timer trigger. This is going to be on a HTTP trigger. But yeah, I'll show you that in due course. So let's go to Data Factory to begin with. And you can see I'm in similar to what Mona was. Here we are looking at our event trigger pipeline. And I want to start with these activities that we got in this loop. So there are two activities that we'll see here, and these are set variable activities. Essentially, what I'm looking to do here is to pull out metadata from our custom event that we'll pass through and pick up from the event grid. So the two items that we'll be looking to get are the job step name, and the other is the job metadata. So these are an example of a simple and a more complex object that we'll pull out. These are nested then within this for each loop. And what we're going to be iterating over is an array of our pipeline parameter called data. So park this in your head for now. We've got a pipeline parameter called data. We can see that here. And after we've looked through the details of the event trigger, then we'll get the opportunity to see where this data parameter is actually going to be coming from. So again, similar to Mona, I'm going to go in. I've done my homework as well. I've got my event trigger already set up. You can see slightly different in that I've selected the custom events trigger rather than the storage events trigger, but functionally this is very similar. So I can go through that same mechanism that Mona did by choosing the Azure subscription and doing the drop downs, or I can manually enter the event grid topic that I want to connect to. So here you can see we're connecting to this SQP events topic. That is a typo. We've got some additional options here as well to do some filtering. So we can filter on the beginning and endings of subjects. We can filter on event types. And there are some more advanced filters that you can add for those events as well. So you can imagine you might have a topic in Event Grid where there are thousands or hundreds of thousands of events being published onto, and there are maybe only a select few that you're interested in triggering this particular Data Factory event for, this Data Factory pipeline for, and so we could use these subject and event type filters to actually limit our scope and make sure that we were only triggering these based on specific conditions. So when I click OK on here, it then gives me the options again on the trigger to actually set up these parameters. And you can see in the parameters that data parameter that we were just looking at is now available to me here, and I can pass in the value. So this value that we've passed in, this is a parameterized value, and that value is the event.data JSON key, which we'll be getting from the event on event grid. Sounds more complicated than it looks, and in fact, if we take a quick look now at the event grid schema, it will make sense. So this is a this is the schema for all of the events that are published onto event grid. So some of the things are starting to look familiar here already. We've chosen our topic, we've filtered on our subject, and then this data JSON object here, we can essentially use this to pass in any additional metadata about our pipeline execution to hand off between whatever our event source is and our data factory pipeline. So yeah, the sky's the limit here really, and you can pass in whatever details you need to. And as we've mentioned, we're pulling these topics, we're pulling these events. Gosh, I'm getting my words twisted. We're pulling our events from our event grid topic, and this is the one that we'd already set up. So this was a manual deployment, again very similar to deploying anything in Azure, and you can see here actually we've got the subscription to that topic. This is actually under the covers. We're seeing that trigger in action. So this is that ADF event trigger that has subscribed to this event grid topic and is in a waiting state, essentially waiting for us to publish a suitable event onto the topic so that it can trigger the work for us. So we've looked at the data factory, we've looked at the event grid. Let's take a look now at the Azure function that we're going to be working with. So you can see this isn't a lot of code. I won't walk through the actual logic of what's going on here in too much detail, but a few things I will call out. So you can see here we've got two things for this function. The first is one of our inputs. This is our job items, and this is pulling from the SQL row list. So this is essentially pulling data from a SQL database for us. And you can see we've got this output event as well, which is where our function is actually using the output binding for event grid to publish the event onto that specific topic. So if you remember these two keywords here, job items and output event, if we flip over now to the function.json file, you can see how these actually present in the definition of that function. So that job items function, that job items variable, I should say, is actually giving us an option to pass in some command text. So here you can then start to pass in the SQL query that you want to be executed against your SQL database on the execution of this function. So this represents your business logic essentially of what are the conditions that I want to pull data from my table in SQL. So you can see we've got a table here called to do, and some conditions here. So where a job step type is 6 and the job step status is set to started. The output that we looked at as well is here. So in this example, very straightforward. The event grid event is being used as an output, and then there's the references here to both the URI of that topic and the secret that we pull from the access keys in the topic details here as well. The final part then is actually the SQL database. So I'm going to jump over here into our favorite SQL Server Management Studio. See if I can just zoom in here a bit as well. Oh goodness, someone's going to have to help me. I don't think my Control Plus is working here, so hopefully this is large enough for you all to see. But if I query this test table, which is this to-do table, which is what our input binding was pointing at, you can see I've got some job steps here. All the job steps are of type 6, but they're all currently in job step type ADF processing. So I'm just going to insert a new record into this table. And now we'll see that we've got a 4th job step. Job step type name is Welsh Azure user group, and this is now in job step status of started. So this is in a good place now for our function to pick it up. Okay, as Muna said, I think this is where the fun begins. So what we're going to do now is stand up our Azure function in our local environment by using the Azure Cool tools. So I do this by entering debug mode here. And then because we are, as I said, using a HTTP trigger rather than a timer trigger, we'll get the option now to hit a HTTP endpoint to run our business logic. So if I go and click on this HTTP trigger here now, you'll see our function's been executed. And if I open my browser, you can see it's passed some details. In fact, it's passed the record that we've just added into that database table onto the onto the event grid topic for us. If I flip over now to Data Factory and go into my monitor pane, we should see, if I refresh, there we go, the triggered pipeline run. And if I drill into the details here, we can see on the output of those set variable tasks, our job step name has been parsed, and we've got our complex job metadata in here as well that can be used to build out that process in our Data Factory pipeline. I think that might be it. So if you want more details on this and how I've set it up, I should just point out I've written this up here in a blog post. So I'll share that in the chat as well if anybody is interested in it. There's some code examples on GitHub as well that I've pulled together, so you can access the code that I've shared today in this repo as well. And yeah, I think that's it. So if perhaps there are any questions, I've not had my eyes on the chat for the last 5 minutes or so because it's on my other screen. So
you might want to take a look. There are a few in there at the moment.
Excellent. All right. Yeah. So I'm happy to sort of do that async and hang around for the next session and do that in the chat. Unless anybody wants to come off mute and have a bit of a discussion about it.
Keep it a few minutes if anybody's got any questions. Yeah, jump off and ask away. Or type it in the chat. And I'm sure if you're all right to stick around, well, I don't know if you're sticking around for the quiz, Joe, you know, this is the thing, you know.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah.
No, that's cool. No, Joe, awesome stuff, matey. That was fantastic. Hamuna, thank you so much for coming on and giving us fantastic talk. The problem with data for me is every time I see it, I want to go and play with it. That's the thing. It's like, and it's the first time I've ever been described as a complex job metadata. So I'm chuffed with that one. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, great pleasure.
No, really great. Thank you both for coming on and giving that awesome talk. If everybody wants to use the emoticons or come off mute and give our speakers a round of applause. There we go. In great synchronization. Awesome. Thank you both. Speak to you very soon. Okay, we shall move straight ahead into the next session then on that note. And I can see Mr. Hedberg has joined us there in the participants list. Victor, if you are ready, we shall hand straight on over to you. You're quiet. I wouldn't want to say you're on mute because you've got no mute icon next to you. So I'm thinking it's your side.
How about now?
There we go.
Yep.
Loud and clear.
So there was a mute button on my microphone as well.
I got one of those. Yeah, cool. Nice to see you, Victor. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So to start with, I'm sorry that the schedule got kind of rumbled around. You know, life gets in the way sometimes.
No, not at all.
But
Joe and Muna were no problem. So thanks for Joe and Muna as well to switch up. But no problem, Victor. These things happen.
Yep. Exactly. Thanks to Joe and Muna for swooping in to my rescue. But yeah, what I was going to talk to you guys about today is the topic of tiering. More specifically, we're going to jump into the topic of tiering in Azure. But to set our sites ready from the get-go, we're actually going to talk about tiering in a normal way as well. When I talk about the normal way, I mean in Active Directory and what you need to look for. Just to give you guys a sense of what I think tiering should look like in Azure as well. So a quick introduction about myself. Who am I? I'm the guy on that picture, Viktor Hedberg. I work as a security consultant at a company in Sweden called TrueSec. What we do is a bit of this, you know, spreading our knowledge to the communities worldwide. A lot of senior speakers on that company: Michael Nystrom, Hassan Al-Shakarti, Marcus Lastfolk, guys that have been around in this hemisphere for a lot of years. So I butt my heads with those guys every day and trying to figure out something smart to talk to you guys about and also to present for our customers. Outside of that, we also do a lot of incident response engagement. I just messaged John earlier today that, hey, I'm kind of busy with doing incident response right now, and as well as I got a football practice to take care of since I'm a coach. So yeah, that's why I'm here presenting at the late session, basically. But yeah, incident response is a great deal of what we do. But enough about that. This picture is, I guess, not that unfamiliar for the most of you. I hope it's not that unfamiliar. But when it comes to tiering, what we're trying to achieve is a set of security controls between different administrative tiers. So if you can think of, you know, in a regular on-premise Active Directory domain, you have your tier 0, which is your basically domain controllers, PKI infrastructure, federation services, Azure AD Connect, those kind of servers that can cause a lot of damage if they're being compromised. Lower down in the tiers, you have your tier 1s, your tier 2, which could be, you know, web services, application services, SQL databases, stuff like that. But what we want to try to achieve with all these security controls is that you can't jump from a regular workstation, sniff out some local admin credentials and jump over to the next system and the next system and eventually achieve what's called a full domain compromise. That's where tiering comes into play, and it starts limiting the threat actors from doing these kinds of savvy maneuvers. The topic of tiering in general, I know the screen says Active Directory tiering, but it applies to tiering in general. It's a concept. It's not something that you can buy off the shelf, do something, you know, click this button and you'll be safe. There's no silver bullet, and that's why we're talking about this to such an extent that I'm talking to you guys here as well. Adoption is vital because we can build real secure infrastructure, but if no one uses it as it's intended to be used, then we haven't secured anything. So adoption is vital, and adoption is also the trickiest part. Control restrictions. All of these slides apply for both on-prem, you know, backups, your fabric, as we like to call it, you know, your hypervisor environment. Like the tier zeros, they should not be able to control any other tier 0. if you know what I'm saying. So we'll talk more about that later on, but a tier 0 in your local domain should not be able to access the tier 0 in your hypervisor domain or in your backup domain, because if there's something that your threat actors are looking for when they gain initial access in an environment, is your backups and your hypervisors. Because if they can get rid of your backups and they can encrypt your hypervisors, then you'll be more inclined to pay them. Because you have no way of getting back your data, basically. But within Active Directory, Tier 0 can control the Active Directory itself. You can create accounts, you can create another Tier 0 admin, stuff like that. And it's a trickle-down effect. So if you're an admin in Tier 1, you can control the Tier 1 structure. If you're an admin in Tier 2, you can control the Tier 2 structure. And I'll show you guys how we build this both in on-prem Active Directory and in Azure later on. And the security controls here comes into play is that your admin account is only allowed for sign-in in the respective tier. And when I'm talking about sign-in, we'll also show you in the demo, we're not allowing local sign-ins. So you can't sign in locally using the console. You need to sign on with remote desktop protocol in a restricted admin mode session. And why is that? Well, the restricted admin mode doesn't save any hashes or your TGT tickets within the target system's memory, basically. So it makes it harder to breach those accounts. When we're talking about local admin rights on endpoints, your laptops, your desktops, whatever, we like to recommend using local admin password solution, also known as LAPS, for these occasions. We don't allow any local admin access to any user, not even IT admins. Not even we ourselves have local admin access on our own systems. And that's because that's the usual entry point for a threat actor. They compromise a user, as I said, get local admin access, do some PSExec or whatever, move laterally into the next system, and then you're in big trouble. And this also brings us to the topic of privileged access workstations. PAWS, SAWS, whatever you want to call them, they are a necessity, both for on-prem infrastructure, Active Directory, as I said earlier, your hypervisor environment, your backup environment, and also your cloud environment. You need to use privileged access workstations or secure admin workstations in order to stay safe when it comes to these types of things. What is a privileged access workstation? Well, a privileged access workstation consists of a laptop, which is hardened, meaning that we've applied security baselines on it. It's really tied down to, what kind of URLs, what kind of endpoints can this device actually access? Because we don't want to let it roam free on the internet. We might not even want to allow internet access at all, because if this is a local PAW, it should only be used to administer your local environment. But in essence, the PAW with your tier X admin account, all folded into a authentication policy silo on premises, means that you can only access that tier using your PAW. You can't access that tier coming from anywhere else. So, meaning that if I was a threat actor and I wanted to compromise an environment which had Active Directory tiering in place, you would need to gain access physically to the PAW. Otherwise, you couldn't actually access the environment. This, of course, means that your admins need to have at least 2 devices, whether they are virtual on the same physical device, but they need to have some kind of separation between your workload stuff, your Outlook, Exchange Online, Teams, whatever, and your admin stuff. You should not be able to work in the same on the same laptop or the same device, contacting the different workloads. Basically, you shouldn't be able to be an admin and a regular user on any laptop or device. Basically, what I'm saying. And when we're looking in the bigger picture, for an admin, this means that you will have separate users, separate devices for accessing separate tiers. As I said, backups and fabric, as we like to call it, when it comes to your hypervisor environment. This also applies for your Azure environment, might I say. Don't use Active Directory joined backups. Just don't. Separate environments for backups completely. And that's, as I said, the threat actors looks for your backups, the first thing they do. And the same goes for your hypervisors. They look for these kinds of things, and they compromise them regularly using domain admin credentials, and you're screwed. But now, in Azure, what can we do? We talked about a little bit, touched upon authentication policy silos, and we don't have Kerberos KDC claims towards Azure because it's not in our on-prem environment. So what can be used instead? We can actually use conditional access to provide similar locking effects for your admin accounts in Azure, meaning that we can use a privileged access workstation to administer Azure. And just for, safekeeping in Azure, please don't sync your domain admins to Azure. Please don't. And you should not ever sync your on-prem users into cloud roles. Not Azure AD roles, not Azure RBAC roles. You would use cloud native accounts to administer cloud stuff, and you would use on-prem native accounts to administer on-prem stuff. We need to separate these two and treat Azure as a separate tier 0. And when it comes to infrastructure separation in Azure, we can look at a couple of different ways of doing this. Either we can have separation on a subscription level. So we'll have separate subscriptions within the same tenant. That means that if I compromise subscription 1, I can't automatically compromise subscription 2. Exactly. Don't sync privilege accounts or groups in either direction. Exactly. So, we can segment this between using different subscriptions. And this, of course, can be multiple subscriptions. We can have, 40 subscriptions. Or as in an environment I'm currently reviewing, 740 subscriptions. So we can do the separation on that level, of course. But this means that if I compromise a global admin account in the same tenant, I own or can give myself the privileges to own all of your subscriptions. You all know the break glass, elevated access parts of Azure, where a global admin gets super admin access, basically, and is a user access administrator on all of your Azure subscriptions. Then you're royally screwed anyways. So you could use separate tenants for separate subscriptions. Why is this important? Well, if you're using Azure for business continuity, disaster recovery, and you're actually using the IaaS parts of Azure to run tier 0 infrastructure, meaning domain controllers, PKI, stuff like that. Well, in short, your global admins are domain admins, and they need to be treated as such. Because a global admin can dismount a VHDX file in Azure, mount it on a local system, and compromise your AD databases, basically. That's an elevation path that most people don't think about, and they just look at Azure as, hey, this is a new bright shiny thing, let's use it for old stuff. I'm asking you that please don't use Azure for running domain controllers, and you could, but you need to secure your domain controllers in Azure. And the same goes for if you're using cloud security workloads to secure on-prem, running EDRs, whatever EDR solution or EDR vendor you're actually looking to use. Treat the EDR solution as a tier 0 system, because your EDR can be used to become domain admin, basically. So in Defender for Endpoint, which is Microsoft EDR solution, you can initiate something called a live response session. This allows the EDR solution to contact your local system as system, basically. And you can, dump the NTDS database, compromising your domain controllers. So what I'm saying here is that, yeah, we can do all this when it comes to different tenants, different subscriptions. That's not enough, basically. We need to use privileged access workstations in Azure as well. And we can, as I said, use conditional access to only allow access from specific devices. And this brings me into the demo part of my session. Let's see if I think I have the demo gods on my side, and now that I just said it, I may have angered them. So this is a Windows 10 device figuring as a jump station, because I can't use it as a PAW because it's not on my local system. It's a virtual machine running in Azure. But what we can do from this PAW is that we can initiate a remote desktop connection towards domain controllers or your certificate authorities also running in Azure. And just to show you guys that's not. Oh, okay, gateway.exe/names. I forgot the command for listing the claims. Whatever. Let's get out of here and just show you guys. So on this PAW, I want to connect to my domain controller. I log on to the system using my tier 0 account, because that's the only account that's allowed to log on to this system, basically. And I specify what server I want to connect to. So let's go ahead and connect. And as you can see, I did not need to enter any password, because I'm performing a Kerberos initiated single sign-on session towards my domain controller in this state. And here you can see the authentication policy silo in on-prem environment, which consists of the device that I just signed in from, my CLI 01, and my admin account. I need to check both these boxes in order to gain access to my domain controller. Of course, I have break the glass accounts, stuff like that, ready to, on a moment's notice, circumvent all these security controls. And they're actually needed to be used in some cases. There are some actions that you can't perform using a regular admin account in on-prem environment or in Azure. So don't be afraid to use the break glass account. We need to break the stigma about it's bad to use the break glass account, but because it's not. They're there for a reason. And just to show you guys real quick, the type of structure that we build within a local environment when it comes to tiering. You can see here, tier 1, tier 2, tier endpoints. This is all script based, so we do this. It takes about, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes to run the script, perform a couple of reboots, and you're golden when it comes to Active Directory. But I can't come on to the Welsh Azure group user group session and not talk about Azure and showcase some of the things in Azure in order to, segment your environment. As I said, we can't use privileged access workstations leveraging conditional access to govern admin access to the cloud. This policy is scoped to apply to the global admin role only. Unfortunately, I had some hiccups, so I needed to exclude my own account. I could not get my device ID into the sign-in claim. I think that's because I'm running a virtual Windows 10 device as my PA. I know for a fact that it worked when I used my physical PA. Unfortunately, I reinstalled that one without thinking that I had it configured in my conditional access policies. But the policy itself is quite easy to set up. When it comes to Azure AD roles, we just select the Azure AD roles in scope. When it comes to Azure roles, we of course need to select the specific users in scope for the PA. So your Azure subscription owners or your Azure virtual machine contributors, you need to select those specific accounts in order to secure their sign-ins. All cloud apps, and here's where the locking effects come into play, because we're using Azure AD joined devices to scope these policies. So in this syntax, we're saying that global admins are prohibited from signing into Azure unless they're coming from this specific device ID. So we're getting the same kind of locking effect that we would get in on-prem Active Directory, readily available in conditional access, which is something you all should take a look at when it comes to securing your Azure workloads. Again, this requires the device to be Azure AD joined. Please don't use a hybrid join when it comes to setting up your PAS, because that means we have an escalation path from on-prem into the cloud, which we shouldn't or would not want to have. So the recommended approach is to use Azure AD joined devices only. This Azure AD joined device can exist or coexist on a virtualized environment. So if you have a virtual tier 0 PA, you can have a virtual tier 0 PA for Azure and your virtual tier whatever PA for the whatever tier, basically. But to showcase you guys on how this works is my account is exempt because I couldn't get the device ID to populate properly. So the demo gods were not in my favor. I kind of jumped the gun anyways. But to show you guys, oh, sorry, I picked the wrong role. Let's see, global admins. We have 3 global admin accounts. We have my account, which I'm signed into the portal with here, and we have the GA account with the GA prefix to it. So let's go ahead and sign out of this account and try to sign in with the GA account instead. And let's see here. We want to sign in as GA Victor. And let me just pop my password up. Let's see. Here we go. And paste. Okay, you cannot access this right now. Your signing was successful, but does not meet the criteria to access this resource. For example, you might be signing in from your browser app, from a browser app or location that is restricted by your admin. And as you can see, we're having trouble with getting a device identifier because this is the Azure AD join device that I'm trying to set up as my PA. But the same policy could be applied for any Azure role. So as I said, we can only scope the policies for Azure AD roles, but we can scope the policies for our Azure AD, Azure admins, basically. We can scope it on groups, saying that in order to administer Azure, you need to come from these specific device IDs. Otherwise, you're locked out. Of course, you need to present some sort of break glass user account in these scenarios as well, because if you by any chance screw up your device identifier or your Azure AD join device, not mentioning that might be what I've done, you always have a way back in because we don't want to lock ourselves out of our tenants. So the only admin accounts that should be exempt from all security controls is, of course, your break glass admin accounts. And please don't do what a specific taxi company did and post your break glass accounts in PowerShell scripts readily available on file shares. That's not a good practice. Your admin accounts, your break glass admin accounts should be kept at a should be placed in a physical place, not a logical place, right? So in a safe, or use one of these to govern your break glass admin accounts credentials. But let's get back into the portal. Okay, so using my break glass admin account in this case, I'm back in. And as I said, we couldn't perform tiering in multiple different ways. When you're using Azure backups, for example, think about, should we place our backups in the same tenant where we're taking backups from? I would argue that you shouldn't. You should keep it in a specific backup tenant. Because if I gain access to your Azure environment as an admin, I now own all of your devices and your backups. So maybe not place it in the same tenant. When it comes to subscriptions, as I said, we can segment it between subscriptions. Please disregard the secure score. I know I'm a security specialist, but this is my lab environment. I don't always walk the walk and talk the talk at the same time. And I'm also an owner on all of the subscriptions, except for this one, which I think I've configured PIM for. And that's also one of the big reasons and big things to use in Azure to govern access is limit standing access, use privileged identity management. I know for a fact, and I think I posted it on LinkedIn for a couple of weeks ago, whatever. Alex Simon actually said, the Azure AD program manager, senior program manager at Microsoft, said that you only need to use a license per physical person. So me, Viktor, can have multiple identities covered by the same Azure AD P2 license. That's what I'm reading into it. And if anyone disagrees, I'll just point at his tweet and say that, hey, Alex Simons said that this is the truth. But yeah, tiering in Azure is more complex than it is on-prem, because we're not just talking about the physical or your personal admin accounts and their access. Because if you have any service principals that can affect a higher tier, that service principal is also a tier 0 asset and need to be secured as such. When it comes to looking at workloads, we do have identity protection policies for workload or workload identities, basically service principals. So it's a necessity to activate these features in order to stay safe in the cloud. There's a lot of things that are good in the cloud. There's a lot of things that are bad when running in the cloud. I've held sessions on the defaults in Azure Active Directory, and I know there are a couple of Microsofties on this call. I'm sad to say Azure Active Directory is not secure by default, even with security defaults applied. So yeah, make sure to do your homework. And as I said, when it comes to tiering in Azure, separate your privileged systems or privileged applications from one another, either by using different subscriptions or by using different tenants, because that's the only way we can be 100% sure, or not 100% sure, but maybe 99.99999% sure that you can stay safe when it comes to the kinds of attacks that we are investigating. And yeah, I don't know how long I've been chatting. Let's see. I've been chatting for about half an hour. I don't have that much else to show you guys, but basically stop giving the threat actors your sensitive credentials. For the love of God, when it comes to, I know I kind of politically talked about the taxi company. Of course, it was Uber that I was referring to. And prompt abuse is a thing. I am one of the people in the world that will not ever use the consent version of multi-factor authentication over SMS-based authentication. Because if I get 20 SMSs in the middle of the night, I know that something is up. For sure, I might be, SIM spoofed or whatever, because, prompt abuse is all that easier for a threat actor. So if you haven't, please go ahead and activate this setting that I'm about to show you when it comes to authentication methods. Microsoft Authenticator. Require number matching for push notifications. Enable this. I know it says preview. People might get spooked by the fact that it's in preview. It's actually still supported. So use it. Application name. That's also a nice feature. Geographic location, that kind of depends. I use a lot of VPN services, so it doesn't really add that much to it. But if you want to use it, go ahead and use it. This is a way better way of using multi-factor authentication than just, allow or deny, because after a while, people get frustrated and just allow the MFA prompt anyway. But yeah, tiering, separate administrative tiers for your workloads, Active Directory, Fabric, backups, and Azure. And I know this is painstaking because as an admin, it might mean that you guys have 7 accounts with dedicated paths. but that's why it's so efficient, because a threat actor need to compromise an account and your physical device in order to gain access to your workloads. And with that said, I will open up for questions.
That was great. Thank you, Victor. Yeah, some great insights there. I think it's always one of those interesting topic areas, security, when to try and find that balance all the time, isn't it? It's always interesting conversations to be had. I think we got a couple of questions in the chat. I know Joe mentioned, there it is, around dev environments. Have you got any good kind of hints or tips around users that need that local admin, a dev environment that needs to go and install bits and pieces?
So when it comes to local admin, we try to stay away from it as far as possible. If there's a need to be a local admin, use Azure AD join devices, because that limits the exposure of the local admin to that specific device. You can't as easily move laterally from an Azure AD join device to another Azure AD join device or a domain controller or whatever. So I would recommend using Azure AD join, or if local admin privileges are needed, use LAPS, local admin password solution, and log on locally with that account. Do not use local admin rights assigned to domain accounts.
Okay, yeah. So I think in our environment, people have obviously a standard account for doing day-to-day stuff, and they have an elevation account for doing stuff when they need. But yeah, we use LAPS already. But yeah, so you think an Azure Virtual Desktop would be a good solution for developers to use instead of their local machine?
Yeah, it could be. It depends on what are you developing. If you're developing stuff that ties into tier 0, I would say no. Azure Virtual Desktop kind of breaks the chain of trust, because, as I mentioned, a global admin can pwn your Azure Virtual Desktop environment. So it depends. If you're developing stuff for lower tiers, yeah, sure. VDIs or Azure Virtual Desktop or whatever you want to use, Citrix, I don't care.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I will recommend it. All right, thank you very much.
Any more questions? I can see James. I think James just put a suggestion forward there about using known locations rather than your device ID.
So named locations, yeah, sure. It's a better way of locking down access than allowing access from everywhere in the world. The problem with IP-based geolocation is that you can spoof IP addresses. So I can, figure as I'm coming from a device IP that I'm not actually coming from. So as I said, I recommend you using device IDs, but I can only recommend you guys so much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think there's anything else in the chat, but no, thanks, Victor. That was an awesome chat, awesome session. Yeah, really, kind of food for thought for those that don't kind of live in the world on a daily basis. So yeah, hopefully a lot of people got a lot from that. So yeah, thank you for joining us, Victor. If everybody wants to do the old, there we go, virtual round of applause. Got to stick around for the quiz now if you've got time, Victor, as well, mind.
Absolutely, I will.
Cool, there we go. Matt, should we head on over to the Quizzer platform?
Yep, I shall just start it up. Right, so we've got bonus prize for the person that comes first who is not a Welsh Azure user group member or a Microsoft employee. Yes, Adam, you're allowed to take, since you're providing the special prize for the first place. Yes, you're absolutely allowed to take part. I'll start it up now, and then I shall share the screen. Everyone should be able to see that one.
Yeah.
And as soon as we're ready.
I'm going to take part, see how abysmally I do.
I can guarantee that Adam will get exactly one of these questions right. At least one of these questions. Let's be more kind. He'll get more.
I'll just get one. Just get one. Yeah.
You should definitely get one of them.
Has Adam seen this platform? I'm assuming you've shown this to Adam, Matt Quizzer.
Well, you have seen it before, have you? Adam?
I don't think I have. I'm like still in Kahoot land, so this looks
Oh.
good. Is it free?
Yes,
I like
it's
free.
Matt developed this, Adam. This is an
It's
open
my baby.
source.
It's me like paying 750 quid for a Kahoot license.
Yep.
Exactly.
You don't want to do that. We certainly didn't want to do that. That's why why it got written. Okay, I think that's about it. Apart from
So that'll
any
be.
more?
There's one person missing. Is there anybody struggling to get on?
I will be one of them, and I'm not going to join. So
I'm on.
Yeah, give me 2 seconds, John.
Oh, there we go. It's Alan.
For some reason, it didn't want to load on my PC.
Submit your bug through to M for Tonka.
yeah,
What's your GitHub username? Memleak.
yeah, absolutely. No, it's actually for Tonka M. Actually, that's yeah.
I was right the first time.
Why
Oh,
am I getting this page is having problems on my mobile and my PC?
Ooh. I'll have a look in the logs later. See what you gain.
Victor's just
No.
turned your phone into a paw.
No. Somebody broke it.
Oh,
You on? Are you going on a PC, Alan, or do you want another?
I'm trying. Ah! I'm going to have a meltdown. This is really winding me up.
Custom emoji.
can't have a custom emoji. And to answer your other question, Adam, yes, I have played Jackbox. Drawful is pretty cool. Is it Drawful? That's part of that, isn't it?
I love Drawful, and there's some like really inappropriate ones as well.
Yes, there are. Yeah. Are you trying Alan still?
Yeah, 1 second. I just had a. Keep just getting loading. Oh, this is irritating.
We'll give you another few seconds, and now. Do you want me to stick the link in the chat? Will that help?
Yeah, maybe. I'm just trying to.
Oh, ignore that link I just put in. That'll take you to the source code. Try. Yeah.
I'm not spelling it. It is QUIZZR.
Yeah.
Yeah, co.uk HTTPS. Yeah. It keeps saying this page is having problems.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to
Don't worry, you can have my prize when I win.
No.
I shall. If it's all right with you, Alan, I'll kick it off.
Yeah, go on. It's yeah. Oh, I'm annoyed. Yeah, go on.
There you go. Which Office product was launched in September 1985?
Oh, I know what that is as well.
Message me, Alan. I'll play for you. You can't tell
I
me.
think I do actually. Oh, I might have just changed my mind seeing the answers.
Oh, hang on.
Correct
Look
answer.
at me, Matt.
Now. Oh, what's going on?
Oops. I messaged the chat.
Refreshing.
Oopsie.
I'm still stuck on my.
Try refreshing.
Yeah, it's just put. It's all right. It's put me back to the. I don't need to play anyway.
Well,
Is
stick with
anybody
it.
else having problems? Got it wrong. No, it doesn't look like. That's all right. You carry on. If it's
All right,
only me.
crack on. Microsoft bought Nokia in September 2013. How much did they cost? Adam might know that one as well.
I do know that one as well. I have a fleet of them.
One of those answers is probably also true. $7.2 billion. 50-50 split on that one. Which of the following is not a supported named data store for data movement in Data Factory? One for you, Joe. I made that one up. See whether or not Joe gets that one right. It's Elastic Cloud. PayPal is a supported source.
Phew.
How much did Adobe pay for Figma?
Oof.
Too much.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, Adam's here. I didn't realise.
It was $20 billion. Ridiculous amount of money. In which month in 2014 did the late Queen send her first tweet?
Did you have to scroll all the way back through a Twitter history for that, Matt?
Yeah, she didn't send many, in fairness. It was October. Oh, that's
Oof.
split the pack. What's the name of the God tier admin account for subscriptions in Azure AD?
None of those.
Yeah.
That's a tough question
What's wrong with that question?
because it's
That's Azure
because
AD,
it's-
not subscription.
because it's not global admin.
For subscriptions?
Yeah.
It's user access administrator.
Which a global admin can be.
Global admin will have permission to do that as well. Anyway,
No,
Mike,
not by default. It doesn't.
Ooh.
Global
Well,
admin's 365, isn't it?
consider lessons learned.
You have to go tick the magic box to elevate the rights, and then you will see all the subscriptions you never knew existed.
Ah, there we go.
Especially if you ever have the unhappy role of presiding over a bunch of students that can create them with Azure Starter or Azure this, that, and the other, and you suddenly discover there's 150 of them.
Excellent. Right, let's move on. Which of the following is not a data format for data sets in Data Factory? And 3 of those are legitimate data formats, apparently. Correct answer is ELF. Because I think I made that one up.
I thought it was troll.
How many data sources can Azure Data Factory connect to? Between 0 and 50, 50 and 100, over 100, or -1. Although I'm sure if you put in -1 somewhere, it would cause it to crash. Over 100 is the right answer. Well done. What's the minimum configurable internal schedule in Azure Data Factory? 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 minute, or 1 hour? "15 minutes. When does MS Ignite start this year?
This is a trick question.
Officially.
Not the UK bit, none of the above.
Ah, well. I just take it off the website.
That's not entirely true. There's a UK bit in Manchester then.
That's two questions there, Matt. We're gonna have to call the adjudicators in, I think.
I know. Well, that's all right. I don't think it's going to make any difference to the scores. Which of these is a valid Data Factory trigger type? Tumbling window, crashing car, rolling event, or queuing incident? Again, in honour of Her Late Majesty. I thought we'd have a queuing incident on this. Tumbling window is the right answer for most of you. And our winner is definitely not Joe P, with Adam in second. Woohoo!
Wait, what are we doing then, Matt? What are the prizes? You've got to make the choice now.
So Adam has very generously provided us with a code for the new swag site for Microsoft stuff.
Awesome.
So our first place person will get that code, which I'm assuming is Joe P. Who's that? Is that actually?
No, it is actually me. So it can't be me.
So if we skip the top 2 then and we do Joe and Neil.
Can I please go home and cry now because it's got badges and rucksacks on it?
And a bit as well. Yeah, the bits are there as well. Well done.
You're just being mean now, frankly.
Alan, I think I'm going to send you an extra code just for your constant presence, basically.
So, Joe, I think we've got your details.
Yeah.
And
Are we doing? We always do 2 prizes, don't we?
Yep.
Neil, we'll get a gift voucher, an Amazon gift voucher over to you. If you drop, I don't know, Neil, you just got Neil guest, so I don't know if you want to just.
Hi, John.
Sorry, who was that? Neil.
Neil Keats. I've been on it before.
Ah, there we are. Neil, you're just really quiet. That's all.
That's right.
Do me a favour. Drop me over your email address, and it'll act as a reminder. Then I'll get you a voucher code sent out as well. Good stuff. And thank you, Adam. That's awesome. Yeah, it's nice to see there's that swag site there now. I think I'm going to get clicking about.
You have to remember the important thing, John, apart from the fact that we have a swag site, because I didn't know there was one. I believe there was one in the US, but the fact that Adam's got a proper accent is a good bonus.
Proper
Try
accent.
my best.
The Welsh Azure user group, any
in
accent.
Berkshire for 12 years, and the accent's still there. It's never going.
I got told mine has been watered down, Adam. I don't know if you can tell it's still over the mic. I'm not sure. Too long in Manchester area.
Right. Cool. Okay. Let's call it to a close then. So
on a serious note, John, that web page kept giving status breakpoint errors for some reason. I don't know. You said there was somebody that was involved in it, or
yeah, it's him there. It's him. It's Matt.
I'll have a look in the log later to see what it was.
You could submit an issue. You can, Alan, on that GitHub repo I put on there. So put your issue over to Matt with any supporting information.
Well, I tried it on 2 browsers and a mobile and kept getting that message, and it seems a bit odd that it appeared on 3 devices. So
yeah, like I say, I've got it. Everything's instrumented.
No,
so
just if it helps you get it going, if you want.
Yeah, no, any information you can give, but I'll check the logs anyway. So
cool. Right, let's bring it to a close then. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining. Just a quick shout out. Thanks to Victor, thanks to Joe, thanks to Muna for 2 awesome sessions again tonight. Really pleased with the speakers that we're getting over to the user group. Like I said at the beginning, help us spread the word, get it out there a little bit. If you want to speak, or somebody wants to speak, or you've got a great idea of a type of talk, then fill in some feedback, of which I shall get you the QR code now when I can find the button. If you don't mind sparing a couple of minutes just to scan that code or go to that URL, fill in a little bit of feedback, that would be awesome. Always helps for us. Thank you all for attending. Next event is going to be on the 19th of October. It's not up in Meetup just yet, but I think we've got 1 speaker confirmed, just waiting on a second speaker for that. But yeah, like I say, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for the speakers coming along, giving up your time. It was fantastic. And yeah, have a great rest of your Wednesday evening, everybody. Thank you for attending. See you all very soon.
Thanks, all.
Many thanks.
Thank you,
John.
Cheers.
It was great. And all the speakers.
Thanks, Alan. Nice to see you again. Or hear you.
Well, I was trying to talk to you yesterday while you were doing your Uber presentation.
Oh, that was all pre-recorded. That was a problem.
Were you not in the chat, though?
I was. I didn't see you in the chat there.
Yeah, I was on. Although